The promise of the scriptures. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the chapter of St. Luke, chapter 15, we read the famous parable of the prodigal son. Jesus tells of the man who took the wealth bestowed to him by his father and squandered it in foreign lands, where he fell into evil ways. At last, repentant, he returned to his father's home. When his father saw him, he was, Jesus tells us, moved with compassion, and ran and fell upon his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven, and before thee I am no longer worthy to be called thy son." But the father said to his servants, "Fetch quickly the best robe and put it on him, and give him a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and bring out the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and make merry, because this my son was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and is found." And they began to make merry. Small-hearted human beings, identified as they are with their little egos, give exaggerated importance to any slight they receive from others. Thus, they imagine God like them to be petty, unpardoning, and vindicative. In God's eyes, however, when human beings go astray, there is nothing to forgive. All of us are aspects only of His own self. He who made us reside in us. He is not far away from us in some far-off heaven. He calls to us always is to return to our own home within. The way of return is described in the Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter. Supreme blessedness is that yogis who has completely calmed his mind, controlled his ego-active tendencies, rajas, and purged himself of desire, thereby attaining oneness with Brahma, the infinite spirit. Thus, through holy scriptures, God has spoken to mankind. This parable of Jesus is one of the most loved. All of those who know it finds courage from this story that Jesus wanted to give to his disciples and to all of us. Because from Swamiji, he wrote this lecture from Jesus that told this parable, and from God this message arrives, that it doesn't matter what we have done in our life or in our lives, God, the Father, is always present to receive us when we are ready. In this parable, I thought to start asking a question. Are you ready to come back home? Because it gives you much inspiration. You see what happened with his son. That as many of us, that in this life or in other lives, we have had so much in our life, but still we have to do our experience. And we go away from home. In this case, the son even asked for his inheritance and leaves, escapes, and he finds himself in the world, far, and wanting to live the life, wanting to have all the experiences through the senses, all these experiences that money can give, because he can pay for all of that, to the point that he loses everything, all the money. And not only when he finishes the money, he arrives to a country where there is nothing, no one has some food, and he finds a job to feed porks, pigs, and this way he doesn't have food, but at least he has a place to sleep. And then he arrives to a desperate situation where he feels he really is dying. And as Jesus taught, we can he was really dying from hunger. Swami and Yogananda said that, as always in Jesus' parables, there is a very deeper lesson for us. And this comes out in this reading, that this young man had left his house, his home in God, having everything with all his divine qualities, and he left all of that, wasted them, living in a way that all his energy would go out through the senses. And for some time this gave him satisfaction and a type of happiness. But at the end, this waste of our divine nature gives us a deep suffering, and we feel that we don't have what we really need to live. And at that point in this story, this young man, going through this suffering, receives the memory of what his home in God was, of everything he had. And we, if not in this life or in other lives, in some way we arrive to this point. It can be through suffering. It can be through a life that brings us down to the lowest experiences. But is it necessary for us to suffer this way to remember what really is our true home? In our ceremony of light, we will listen these words that I read in English first.
Whereas suffering and sorrow in the past were the point of man's redemption, for us now the payment has been exchanged for calm acceptance and joy. In italiano, mentre la sofferenza e tristezza nel passato era quello necessario per la redenzione dell'umanità, per ora per noi il pagamento è stato mutato nella calma accettazione e la gioia. Questo è ciò che
This is what we, wherever we are, and all of you are here because you have arrived to the point of choosing with consciousness. We know that if we choose to start our trip back home, God is already present. The Father is not waiting for the Son to arrive. He is there and He is embracing you. For us, in our life, this point of remembrance that there is something else in life and that we do not have to continue suffering and living in the limitation of being a human being. We have as well the same decision. And in the story of the prodigal son, there is the sense of what he is living with this decision. He actually first has the sense of, I am not, I don't deserve to be in my Father's house anymore, to be accepted as a son of God. And at that point, many people just feel defeated and do not go on. They feel they are not worthly. So all possible life dies. In this two sides of the road, of two roads, intersection, we know that we can choose, because what he chose at the end wasn't a merit of it was the reflection of, I know that even servants in that house eat and have a house and are happy, and I as well can do that. So that way he comes and does his first step to come back to the Father's house. We don't listen, feel, we don't know about what happened later, afterwards. We know that they embraced him, that he was pardoned, that forgiven, that he was accepted in the house of the Father. But then it doesn't say what happens. But we can imagine that seeing that, it's not important whatever I did, I can actually do whatever I want because my Father accepts me always. And that really he hasn't learned profoundly the lesson of this moment of being together at home. And continue to live just like he was living before. And here is what happens is that you are there. He is negating the light and the joy of this possibility. There is also the possibility that arriving with all this joy of being again in the house of the Father, then he really is humble and arrives to be a good son and to serve without being a servant, but understanding that he can serve the Father, serve the brother that stayed home. And that this attitude of understanding the great gift of love, unconditional love of the Father that accepts him, knowing that he is always loved in an unconditional way and that is always accepted, will live from that point onward in the love and joy of the Father. And for us in this moment, if I tell you that is what our masters say, that Heavenly Father, Mother, Friend, loves you in this moment as never He has loved you, and as He will never love you, as the most greatest love. What would you think? Do you think you could be able to receive this love? To feel that you are merit this love? This is what we have to do. We are unconditionally loved, without reserve, without judgment, as we are by God. And in whatever moment, we can go back to our home in God, and of this unconditional love. There is a story I would like to read. It comes from a book from Antonio de Mello, The Song of the Bird. I like it very much. It's I have it page 47. Jesus at the football match. I read it. Jesus Christ said He had never been to a football match. So we took Him to one, my friend and I. It was a ferocious battle between the Protestant punchers and the Catholic crusaders. The crusaders scored first. Jesus cheered wildly and threw his hat high up in the air. Then the punchers scored, and Jesus cheered wildly and threw his hat high up in the air. This seemed to puzzle the man behind us. He tapped Jesus on the shoulder and asked, "Which side are you rooting for, my good man?" "Me?" Jesus replied, visibly excited by the game. "Oh, I'm not rooting for either side. I'm just enjoying the game." The question turned to the neighbor and sneered, "An atheist." We took him up on the game. After the game, was he? People are strange. They think that God are on their side or against people of the other side. And Jesus said, "Yeah, I agree." And He said, "That's why I don't like religions." And people said, "People are more important than religion. People are more important than Sabbath. You should be attentive of what you say." One of us said, "You have already been crucified once because you had said something like this, remember?" And he said, "Yes, and by religious people," Jesus said with a smile. I like this story because it actually puts Jesus in the context of our life. If He does not take sides of one against the other, if all of them don't take sides, God, for sure, will not take sides of one or the other. This means that not only we have have the love of God, His acceptance of being in home in God. And this is true for us, and it's true for every other person. No one is not accepted and loved by God. It's the same for, it doesn't matter whatever he has done in this past. The prodigal son has done things that a human father could judge and left him out of his house. But our Father is always there to accept us, is accepting. In our ceremony of light, Festival of Light, we have a part where we say that we choose. We choose God, your love. We choose only you, only thee. This does not have to be something easy that we say. It has to be like the whole ceremony that we will listen afterwards. We have to be conscious while we are saying, while we are singing and chanting, because with our awareness we can decide and choose every time in the ceremony of Festival of Light, every time we meditate, every time that in our life we decide to act in a dharmic and right way, and not just what we want to do. And when we do this as a everyday life, we are home in God. We are home in divine light, in unconditional love. In the part of the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna talks about how can we do when we arrive to that point. And you that are here are at that point where we want to choose God and we want to do the right choice. And when there's the question of how we can do it, it's Krishna that gives us the indication with the calm mind. Today is not so easy. Whatever person that is following the events in the world easily can have a turbulent mind from what he reads or sees. And this is as well a choice that we want to have, to take. In the poem Samadhi of Yogananda, he says, I will say it in English first.
Longer, thirsty, guru-given meditation comes this celestial samadhi.
The samadhi is the state of union between God. We want, when we start in a conscious way, when we start our spiritual life, we want to do everything not to lose time. It's not just to sit in silence, but we really wish that our meditation takes us deeper and deeper, and the techniques help us to do that, to make our meditation, our sadhana longer, and not to be satisfied with only 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, but to stop our life and find the time to contact our highest self with our calm mind, and to to make ourselves thirsty. I don't know if you've been walking in the desert and you haven't had water with you. You can feel what it means to be thirsty. So this is how we wish to meditate, with that thirst of knowing ourselves and touching inside our highest self. And with this meditation we can have contact with our highest self. That way we let go attachments, identifications with the self, with the small self, limited self, with that part of ourself that can run with the inheritance and leave home. We let go with that interior contact, that definition, limited definition of who we are. And with this, we can calm in ourselves the waves of the mind that keep us linked and bonded to the external world. And that way, we manage to experiment, as Krishna says, to the control of our ego tendencies. The more we are in contact with our higher self, the less our ego has power to draw us outward from this divine presence in ourselves, and less attraction. The more experience you have of who you are inside, of God inside you, that is lightening, that is loving, that feels an incredible peace that no one can touch. When you have that, the tendencies of ego go away and will not have the power anymore. And in this ability, Krishna, Swami says this, wisdom, spiritual wisdom reveals in the soul once we are free from ego's tendencies. And we can, again, through meditation, doing the ceremony of purification when you're here on Thursday in the morning, or sometimes on Sunday morning, we do this purification ceremony that helps us to think what is important for us to liberate and to free in our lives. And we can do the ceremony even home. And then through service to others. That way also the ego can take less strength inside of us and offer that service to God, feeling that it's God that is acting through us. And when we liberate ourselves from these tendencies, then we can really be happy. This story of the prodigal son can and helps us understand that everything that the world could give him was not what he was searching, and everything that the world tells us that can give us also will be a delusion. It's just our true self, the highest self, that we can really experiment the love, happiness, and the true home. Freeing us from our pendulum of our desires, negative, positives, what I likes and dislikes. In that moment, it's natural to realize our natural state, where we can really experiment the union with Spirit. As a great saint said, Lord, you have created us for you, for yourself, for thy, and our hearts are restless until they will find find calmness in you. As Premi said, we just are back from the Holy Land. It was a great blessing. I invite you all, whenever you are ready, to do a pilgrimage, to perceive the presence of Jesus in the places of his birth, of his youth. One of the most preferred places is Galilee. The seaside is where he received the disciples, and there is a great joy of this awakening of the disciples, of this home in the soul. And Jesus taught them there. For us, this is something that we want to bring back, because we really felt our true home in those places. But it's not there. Where our true home is in the presence of the Christ consciousness, of the presence of the divine consciousness that each one of us, wherever we are physically, we can be there. This is the promise of the writings, the teachings, that if we decide, we choose to do what brings us inward, to experiment a deep meditation, the presence of love and joy and light, the promise of the writings are that we will live in bliss, in love, forever, forever. And that we will discover that our true home is where the choice of God as anchor. I hope for you all that the choice is something you do every day, and that brings it to you closer and closer to your true home in God.